Harihi Om. Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryan Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai. So now then the brothers, then they're in the forest. They've been visited by Krishna and by Markandeya Rishi. And so now they've shifted to the Dvaitavan part of the forest. Well, the Pandavas dwelt at Dvaitavan. The air was constantly filled with the sound of Vedic recitations. The entire region became as holy as Brahma's abode. The sound of mantras from the Yajna, Rig, and Samavedas, charming and delightful to the mind, were mingled with the mighty twang of the Pandavas' bowstrings. They honed their martial skills by hunting dangerous forest animals. In accordance with scriptural codes, they maintained the population of tigers, boar, buffalo, and other beasts in the Kamika forest, protecting the rishis from attack as they engaged in meditation and sacrifice. See, is that the kings, they need to maintain their martial skills, and to do that, then, just shooting at a non-moving target or something like that will, deal in it with the particular skill itself, but the reflexes in that it won't deal with. So then you have a combination. So according to the Vedic thing, then you have this combination where then the tigers, and as mentioned here, tigers, boars, buffaloes, and other wild beasts, the ones that can give trouble, and that they will grow in population. And when they grow in population, then they'll come and bother the sages. If there's less of them in the forest, then, they'll move around nicely. They have their own territory. They won't go near the sages. But when they are more and more, then they have to expand the territory. And so naturally they'll come into the areas where the sages are. And the sages are not just everywhere. They're always along, a holy river, a holy lake, or something like that, because they need the water. And it'll also be a nice, pleasant place. And so that area alone then has to be free from too many of these wild beasts. If you go deep into the forest and that, then they don't bother the animals there. But they'll naturally with time come out farther, so then this puts it, and then they go farther back into the forest. So this way then the kings are benefited, the rishis are benefited, and also just the balance within the forest is benefited. Because if there's too many predators, they make trouble for everybody. So there must be the balance. And we see is that afterwards, if they kill the tigers, of that, these, because they're considered like the kings or the royalty of the forest, they're also given a royal, the rites of passage, like that. So the death rites that you would do for the king when they die, they do the same for the tiger or the lions. And so then it's that. And the others, then their skins are used for various purposes and things like that. Yudhishthira loved the company of Brahmins. Now that he lived in their midst, his mind felt serene and his grief dissipated. All the world's greatest rishis had come to Dvaitavan to be with him. Narada, Vyasadeva, Vashishta, Bhrigu, Angira, Kasyapa, and others. And they all worshipped Yudhishthira as the celestial sages worship Indra in heaven. Right? So because he's such a great personality and great king, and he'll take care, and because he'll be the perfect student and all that, all these great sages, they all come to be able to take part in that association. Because then they come, others come, then they can all hear all these wonderful things that each one is saying and talking about. Because each one will specialize in particular areas. And so then each of the others, then they will hear, and in their discussions, Yudhishthira's hearing, plus Yudhishthira will take care of them nicely and be respectful. And he's also, because remember Draupadi's celestial plate, then they're also feeding all of them, so then it even makes it easier for them. They can just focus directly on their sacrifice and discussion of Shastra, so it becomes very favorable for everybody. Yudhishthira also returned their worship and spent his time discussing spiritual topics with them. He was actually starting to enjoy forest life. In many ways, he found it preferable to the onerous and often harsh duties of being a king. The gentle son of Dharma was happy to live a simple life of spirituality, but he always kept in mind his God-given duty as a Kshatriya. So he preferred living in the forest. It was comfortable in that because he being connected with Dharma, then he doesn't have to worry about all the politics. But at the same time, then we see is that because as Kshatriyas, they're supposed to manage, the people and see everything goes nicely, not just his own personal benefit. Then you see he always keeps that in the back of his mind. So now for these 12 years, he'll focus on this. But after the 12 years, then it's time to get back to his natural duties in the kingdom, right? So being in the forest, he's following the natural duties according to Dharma. And then when he's back in the city, he'll follow those rules. That responsibility could not be whimsically abandoned. Even if unpleasant, duty must always be done for the Lord's pleasure. It was thus with mixed feelings that Yudhishthira dwelt in the forest, awaiting the day when he could again resume his duties as a ruler. Draupadi, however, was still sorrowful. She found the course of events that led up to their exile difficult, and she burned with the humiliation they had received at Duryodhana's hands. Right, because she's a Kshatriya, so they have all the same Kshatriya qualities. And so there's always these anxieties that will be there and the main anxiety is she's insulted, but the point is it's a matter of justice, that as kings, they're supposed to act in a particular way. And as kings, they weren't acting in that way, so they're unfit as kings. So then the point is Yudhishthira should be the king, because he will take care of the citizens, he'll rule properly and all that. So it's not just that she's feeling bad about herself, she's feeling bad that injustice is there and that her husbands that are supposed to be emperors of the world are now out in the forest, and somebody who's, not actually qualified is now sitting on the throne. Sitting alone one evening with Yudhishthira, she revealed her feelings. "O king, when I think of the wicked Duryodhana and his followers living happily in Hastinapur, after having sent you to the forest, my heart burns. Without doubt, he is delighting in our misfortune. When you set out for the forest, all the Kurus cried except the wretched Duryodhana, Karna, Shakuni, and that vicious Dushasana." Draupadi again found herself weeping. She remembered her parting words with Kunti and Gandhari. Both of them had grieved at her humiliation. How long would it be before she was avenged and the wrongdoers punished? Right? Because it means the time and all that. Because it's a matter of you're dealing with experience, and these feelings are constantly there. And so then, especially for the feminine nature, they can focus quite well, but in the emotional arena. And so within that, happy things are happening, you can focus on that, make everything very nice and all that. Things are sad, that will become the prominent. Well, much of the time for men, they'll just focus on the duty and just mechanically go through so they can be less affected by these things. So he says, how long will it be? It's understood it's going to be after 14 years. That's what's going to happen, because they're 12 in the forest, then 1 year in incognito, says 13. So when 13 ends, then they come out. So in the 14th year, then it will be avenged. But at the same time as the experience is now, and it always continues until it is corrected. Seeing you seated here on this grass mat and remembering your ivory throne encrusted with jewels, I feel such anguish that I can hardly look at you. Your body is smeared with mud from the riverbank when once it was daubed with the finest sandalwood paste. You once wore costly silk garments, now you wear deerskins and tree bark. How can I bear to see my husbands, who were once waited upon by numerous servants, now scouring the forest for food? Right? Her point is that they're Kshatriyas, they have their duties to perform, and her husbands are qualified for this, and they've been, honored in this way. And so this is the position that they should be functioning at. She's not really worried about herself like that, because, being a great devotee and all that, and the husbands being great devotees, they're looking at these things. So she's just thinking they'll be much better suited for doing these services. Draupadi's sorrow suddenly turned to anger. All this is due to the evil schemes of sinful men. O king, does your plight not arouse anger in you? Right? Because feminine nature it's about the intensity of the experience. And so it's called, Rupa Swāmī defines it's called Vyavichari bhavas. You have all these different movements of feelings, and they one comes up and then another one comes and that, and there'll be they'll oppose each other, then they'll go away, and all. So there's this constant rolling of taste of various aspects. So for them, because it's connected with devotional service, he sees her husbands as devotees and Krishna and all that, then it will have that kind of flavor to it. On the material platform, of course, then these things are experienced, but they don't necessarily give the happiness that you're looking for, not like on the spiritual platform. And so her point is, does this not arouse anger? Why are you so peaceful, right? Because he's just also, this is the way it is. He's resigned to that, and he's finding peace in that. Otherwise, then he'll always be disturbed by anger. Look at Bhima glancing at you again and again, constrained only by his love for you. He does not rise up and destroy the Kauravas, right? So he's constantly glancing. Is he telling me to go and kill them? No, he's not. Is he telling me to kill them? No, he's not. So he keeps looking over, did he give the order yet? No. So he's just sitting there. He's just waiting. If Yudhishthira right now says, now, he would run back to Hastinapur. And without even stopping running, he'd just go in there and kill them all. Like that. So he's just waiting for that moment. So honoring your promise, he sits containing his anger. Look too at Arjuna. He understands Bhima's mind and is forever pacifying him, right? So that's what he said, is that Dhritarashtra knows that Arjuna is the most patient because he's pacifying everybody like this. Bhima is the most valorous. He's just ready to, take up the challenge like that. Yudhishthira is the most religious, like that. By the power of Arjuna's bow, thousands of kings were obliged to wait upon the Brahmins at your Rajasuya sacrifice. Now that same Arjuna has become grief-stricken. Does this not make you angry? And look at Madri's youthful sons. They are as dear to you as they are dear to your mother, Kunti. Now they are forced to live the hard lives of ascetics. Does this not make you angry? Right? Because they're the younger ones. And so the younger brothers, then there's always that compassion. It means that as the elder brother, he deals with the youngers like the children. Like the elder brother represents the father, so he'll deal with the younger ones like that. So Bhima and Arjuna are like, they're just below him, But the Ashwins, they're considered like the youngest. And so then always the youngest will have that special compassion. And so he's saying, doesn't this make you angry that these boys that deserve, such, you would take that effort to make that arrangement for them, as the elder. Yudhishthira listened impassively to his wife, carefully taking in her words, right? He's not emotions coming up and this and that. He's just listening very nice, trying to see exactly what she's saying, what she's getting to, what point she wants to make. She was surely entitled to her anger and frustration. He knew that and felt wholly responsible. The king remained silent as his wife continued, right? Because he feels if he hadn't gotten involved in the gambling match, then this wouldn't have happened. But he got involved in the gambling match because he had taken a vow earlier that he would, always listen to the elders, because someone had informed him that there would be a great fight and all the Kurus would be destroyed. So he wanted to avoid that by then listening to the elders and not getting involved in the fight. But by destiny, then that very same vow is the one that caused that allowed the gambling match to happen, that therefore they're in the forest and they insulted Draupadi. That's going to cause the destruction. So you see just how fate works is so amazingly engineered that despite our efforts, it's what's supposed to unfold will. So one may ask then, what is our position in all this? Where's our free will? It's how we act within that, because we get the results of how we act. So the fate that is coming to us now is the result of how we acted before. The previous situations, how we reacted in those, that's what's causing now. So if we're getting a bad reaction, a bad situation now, that means we reacted badly. So if we react properly, that will improve our situation. But even then, it's still within the material world. So for the devotees, they want to improve the quality of their reaction by being God conscious, seeing it in that context. And then that will take them out of the material world. I cannot understand why you have not risen up to destroy the Kauravas. So Draupadi is still speaking. Surely, after all that has happened, such a response would be in accord with morality. Is your discrimination failing? It is always appropriate for a Kshatriya to show anger when sin is committed. And sin has surely been committed by the Kauravas. How can you sit there as if you forgive them? If a king cannot distinguish between the time to be angry and the time to forgive, then he is lost. Right? Because he has to know what's right and what's wrong. Someone's wrong, that has to be corrected. Someone's right, then that has to be there. So it's not like they did this and at the end of the match, then they said, and came and begged forgiveness from Yudhishthir and especially, made special effort, for Draupadi, that how, we acted so badly and, the passion of the moment, please forgive us and all that. Like it was said before, Vyasadeva said, if you want to save the Kurus, then send your son to be the servant of the Pandavas while they stay in the forest. Because they're going to stay in the forest because they've said, they've taken the vow of being in the forest. So therefore, during that time, your son, Duryodhana, should go to the forest and serve them. Then you could say, now it's time to forgive. But they haven't done anything to reconcile. They haven't done anything to correct. So by Draupadi's point, now is the time for anger, right? Because immorality has been done. The beautiful Draupadi looked intently into Yudhishthir's eyes as she went on, right? Because she's trying to see what's the reaction, what's he doing, where is it going. I also know the scripture. Scripture states that Duryodhana and his brothers deserve to be punished. Scripture states that the humble and ever-forgiving person is always neglected, while he who is powerful and assails others at the proper time is respected as a king. Right? Yeah, so if you're ever forgiving, humble, and ever, the Brahmins do that. Because they know why get involved, because then it just starts a cycle, and they don't want to get involved in that. But we see is that Draupadi's pointing out for Yudhishthir that they're kings, they're Kshatriyas. So something's wrong, it's their business to correct. That's why the Brahmins can be so peaceful, because the Kshatriyas are taking care of it. That's their business. That's where they excel, that's where their focus is, that's where their knowledge and abilities is in that, so they take care of that. And the Brahmins, it's about studying and teaching and developing all these nice qualities and all that. So then they're pointing that out, is that as Kshatriyas, this is what we should do, right? So he's ever forgiving, so he's acting like a Brahmin technically. But it's because of his vow, it came about because of the gambling match as a Kshatriya, he accepts it. Yudhishthira looked with compassion upon his wife. She had suffered so much, and if anything stirred his heart, it was her suffering, for which he felt he had been the cause, right? So his brothers are suffering, he's suffering, but, they're Kshatriyas, so you gotta, push on. That's the reality. But why Draupadi should suffer? She shouldn't suffer like this. It was one thing if she had just been in a room and then found out that, okay, now they're all been exiled, and so then she just goes out with them to the forest. But no, she had been dragged into the assembly and insulted in front of all the kings. So that's, really a bad situation. His heart still burned when he thought of how she was dragged into the assembly hall. The pain of that moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. But this was not the time to make war. Draupadi could not understand the entire situation, because she's looking at the emotional element, the religious element and all that, and from that perspective, it's all correct. She's not wrong. She's quoting scripture. She knows the scripture. Because the point is, as Kshatriyas, whether the boys and girls are trained in the same things. It's just that then in the performance of duties, they have different aspects, because the point is you have to raise the family and take care of the family. At the same time, you have to provide for the family. So both have to be done. It's not a matter of prestige. It's just a matter of who's better at what. The male mentality can shut off to all the emotional things and just do the duty. So you can go out into the world, do occupations that aren't necessarily the most wonderful situations, and not be affected, because you know you can come home. And in that environment, then you can deal in the nice depth of relationships. And the feminine nature is to work within relationships and emotions and all that. So then being in that kind of more controlled environment, of the home or their situation or whatever it is, that broader situation, community or things like that, then she was able to have that's where she excels, that's where she can do things, and then you get the perfect balance like that. So she knows her side of it. And she knows the general overall, but the details that come bigger, that she's, may not be as practiced at. Like that. Yeah. So, yes, so we'll end here and then here. In the next class here, what is the continuation of the discussion. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai.